All right, can you hear me now?
Hear you great. Can you hear me?
I absolutely can. Glad we could finally make this happen.
Dude, an absolute pleasure. And I can't say thanks enough again for totally understanding and getting it.
That's life, man.
Such is life, dude.
I mean, it actually worked out that you texted me this morning too, because I had for some reason thought this was 1 o'clock on my calendar, and I totally spaced that it was in the morning, and I was just about to go on a walk with my son for probably like an hour more, and he texted me, and I was like, oh shit, that's right, we got to record this.
Dude, it's a really interesting thing, right? Because I assume since your life doesn't have a 9 to 5 any real different than mine does per se, not that I don't have shit to do every day, but like the time on the clock isn't the same as it was when I had a regular 9 to 5 type gig.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I was in New York City and I was working in advertising, and my whole kind of life revolved around meetings and my calendar for the day, um, I feel like I had a really good grasp of time. And now, particularly when I travel a lot, like what I'm doing right now for book signings and events, I lose all concept of days and time, and my time zones are fucked up. And I'll wake up at 9 one day and 4 the next, and I just lose track of everything. I mean, right now too, because I came back from LA and I had my dog at daycare, and I picked him up, and he wasn't acting right. He was kind of lethargic and acting kind of odd. So I took him to the vet, and it turns out he has double pneumonia.
Oh,
And I thought we were going to lose him like 3 nights ago. So I've been getting up at 4 a.m. every night too to give him one of his treatments. And so my schedule is completely out of whack right now.
oh man. Sorry to hear about the pup stuff, dude.
Oh,
Dogs.
he's good. He's going to survive. He's going to live. But 3 nights ago, it was very touch and go. And they wanted to hold him at the vet, and it just didn't feel right to me because I know he hates the vet. I know the stress and anxiety the vet causes for him. So I opted to do the treatments myself. So I bought the machinery, everything I would need to do it at home. And I think bringing him home actually saved his life, because I think if he would have been at the vet with that stress, feeling abandoned, I don't think he would have held on that night, because that night it progressed so quickly. I think that night, if he was at the vet, he would have just been like, you know what, I can't do this. So I'm glad I brought him home, and he's made leaps and bounds the past 24 hours. So I feel really good about it.
I mean, was it at a point that they were talking about like, do you need to make a decision to kind of put him down?
No, but they made me sign a piece of paper saying that I understood that by bringing my dog home, he was likely going to die. I had to basically sign a waiver to alleviate them of any wrongdoing for allowing me to bring him home. But it just felt right. It felt like the move, and I I
Also,
believe that
if my
it
dog's
worked.
gonna go, he can go at my house.
Yeah, that was kind of my thinking too. I mean, he was so bad that I just figured he's at least going to be comfortable. I'm not going to have the vet call me at 5 a.m. and tell me he went in the middle of the night and I wasn't there and we weren't there for him and he just died in a kennel.
No fucking way.
But that's all depressing stuff we don't need to talk
Yeah,
about.
right. So, dude, you're in the middle of book tour whirlwind, getting after
I
it.
mean, it's not so much a book tour as it is kind of making up for lost time. My history book, Fucking History, released in 2020, August 2020, right in the middle of everything being locked down. And there was kind of a quasi book tour plan for that, which got postponed and totally killed. And so I just decided this year I was going to kind of plan my own. And so I've been doing it without my publisher, really. I mean, they've been helping facilitate getting the books delivered, but I just kind of put a call out on social media asking people, hey, if you have connections to bookstores, if you guys would like to host me, I'm willing to do it. And I actually ran into the events coordinator for the last bookstore was boarding a plane the same time I was in Vegas, and he stopped me and said, "Hey, big fan of your work. Do you want to host an event here?" And the last bookstore is one of the coolest bookstores in
Yeah,
the
it's one of the
country.
cool.
So
That's in the Pacific Northwest, right?
no, it's in downtown LA. It's in like
Okay.
it's on like the border of Skid Row. It's a very sketchy area, but it's one of the coolest bookstores. Has a lot of rare collectibles. You've probably seen it in multiple films. I mean, Gone Girl was filmed there.
Okay.
A lot of places use it as a set. So that kind of worked out for me, and it's just kind of springboarded to where now I have the support of my publisher because I'm selling out these events. and I'm going to continue doing them for this year. I'm going to be over in London and Ireland and Scotland in October, and I'm going to try and line some up when I'm there as well. But it's not so much a book tour as it is just me wanting to get out there and connect with people. It's really easy for me to lose sight of kind of the end placement of my work as far as who it touches and how it affects their life. I mean, I have that digital divide. I can read comments, I can read DMs and know that my work's impacting people, but there's something very different about talking in front of a group and watching someone's facial gestures and having someone afterwards come thank you and tell you like a specific example of how your work touched them. And what I've been doing the past few weeks has probably been just as motivating for me as it has for other people. It's kind of got me back on track to where I feel the need to get really working on my next book, and I can see that there's an end means to it that really helps people, and so it's
Sure.
been great.
Man, and so that's something I want to dive in a little bit more to, because how did you get into being an author? Like I've got a couple books that
First of all,
I've
I'm
done,
not
but
an author. We'll talk about that
sure.
later.
Right, I
Um,
guess. But
um,
yeah, so previous job you were doing marketing type stuff living in New York.
So I've been writing most of my life, most of my adult life. I've been writing, whether it was for free or for a living. I went to college for business. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur of some sorts. I
How
wanted
much you feel
to.
that degree helped?
I think the degree helped me with time management, but also, had I not gone to college, I don't know if I would have pursued writing as a career as
Hmm.
early as I did. And the reasoning why is in school, whether it was an economics class or an accounting class or some business theory class, I enjoyed writing papers. I enjoyed when my professors assigned long writing assignments because um, I was good at it and I kept getting A's on all my papers, and I my professors were always complimenting me on my writing, and that's when it kind of dawned on me that that's what I really love to do. And so college actually helped me discover my love of writing. And so then I started volunteering. No, not some volunteering. I reached out to a couple local papers in Salt Lake City, Utah, where I was living at the time, and I offered to write a music column for them. Bands that would come into town or new albums that were coming out. I wanted to review them. I did that all for free just to kind of get my name out there. And then I started getting a bit of a portfolio behind me, and I used that to get into nutrition. I worked for a lot of nutrition companies, whether I was writing, the product description on the back of the label, or I was writing like the forward facing advertising copy and in marketing emails. And then from there, I got into advertising, which was kind of my end goal all along, because advertising copywriters get paid pretty well, and I wanted to make money as a writer. And when
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
my first.
it's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, I am very fortunate to make money writing. A lot of writers don't. There's a lot of very, very talented writers and other creatives out there that can't make a living off their work. And so when I got my first advertising job and I was able to buy a truck and pay for an apartment with writing, I was kind of dumbfounded. I was like, holy shit, like I have kind of the dream job I've always wanted. There's nothing else in my life I'd rather do than write to this day. And it was when I was writing a lot of TV scripts that the captain kind of came about. And it was because I wrote a really funny joke one time for a furniture company about shopping for a coffee table. And I related it to dating in the sense that you don't want someone too big or too small. In the end, you just want something stable that fits your life aesthetic. And they thought the joke would be seen kind of in a bad light online, maybe
I can
body
see it.
shaming or something like that. So I decided to tweet it instead. I thought the concept was too good, and I tweeted it, and it got pretty popular. It got retweeted a bit, and I didn't want my online commentary to affect my job. And so I didn't want to use my real name on social media. And I hadn't really had a personal social media up to this point. It was never a big thing for me. So I just went by the captain, a nickname my friends had given me. And I started tweeting a lot of my concepts instead of giving them to my clients. And so when I was writing scripts, I would take my A content, I would tweet it, keep it for myself. I would give my clients my B and C content, which was still good enough. And I just kind of had this thing on the side starting to grow and evolve. And it allowed me to speak my mind without someone else having feedback. It allowed me to say what I want to say without a client telling me no. And I had the divide between my professional career and my personal commentary online with the name. So I felt pretty safe commenting on, touchy subjects or writing stuff that could be seen, writing stuff that could be seen at the time as, kind of a bad humor. But after doing that for so many years, my writing career was taken off on the side. I moved to New York City. I became a, kind of a partner in an advertising agency there. And I was at a meeting one day with a Ritz-Carlton property. I was doing a lot of hospitality consulting at the time. And one of the asset managers, an older guy, probably in his 60s, said to me, my wife and I love your work. And I thought he was talking about kind of my advertising background. And he said, no, like we follow your Instagram and we love it. And that was the first time kind of my worlds had really collided at that level. And then I started getting work.
What was that first feeling of that? Was there a little bit of like, holy shit, all the stuff that like shouldn't be the professional shit that people are hearing?
It was actually a huge relief because I was like, here is this individual that's going to make a decision on this large contract, and he's already a fan of mine, and he knows. And honestly, my best work belonged to the captain. In my opinion, my best writing was the captain because it was completely unadulterated. It was what I really thought and felt. And so the fact that he liked that work, I knew that he had seen my best work.
Right.
He hadn't seen my content or my work that was stripped down for marketing's sake. He'd seen what I really care about. And so at that point I was kind of like, oh, this project's in the bag. I'm definitely going to get this gig. And it just kind of kept growing like that. And what I said earlier about not being an author is I don't consider myself an author yet. I consider myself a writer. I feel that writers write about the world and authors create worlds. And I haven't,
okay, interesting.
And I haven't done that yet. And that's probably me just being a stickler for words.
Look, I think how you define something's really critical, like whether that's success or whether that's any of these things. Like, I mean, there can be the world known definition of any of those things, but how you define author, how you define writer, how you define success, how you define, progress is what really matters to you.
Mm-hmm. It also helps me too, because there's still more for me to grasp. There's still more to strive for. And I use that almost in reverence to respect real authors, because writing a novel or a fiction is, in my opinion, a lot harder than writing a nonfiction.
Dude,
a lot more difficult than doing what I've done so far.
So Tarantino's been writing. Mm-hmm. So like he's got a novel for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That's cool.
So I picked it up, and there's an audio book of it, which I prefer. And Jennifer Jason Leigh does all of the narration and crushes it. And like, she does all the characters and nails mannerisms. And like, it's so much better than the film because that's the depth of universe that Tarantino creates around like Cliff's character, Brad Pitt's character in the film.
Yeah.
Man. Like, you don't get any of this stuff about him going and being a war hero in Korea and being around World War II and like all the stuff he saw, and then like realized he didn't like American culture. And so he fucked off and lived in France for a while and was a pimp for a little bit and like worked with these women and did this other stuff, and finally makes his way back to the States and knows that he doesn't want to be part of the regular system. And he's like stuntman, and like tells how he ends up there in this roundabout way. And this fucking great.
I didn't know that existed as a book, but now I want it.
Dude, it's 12 and a half hours. It's great.
That's badass. This is why people are never satisfied with the movie adaptation of a book. And part of it is because when you're reading a work of fiction, your mind finishes the book for you. You see a lot of fiction writers make the mistake of overly explaining a scene, and they explain it to the minutia, and it makes it not as fun to read because it kind of takes away your imagination. the job of a fiction writer is to give you just enough to be on the same page, pun intended, but to allow your imagination to complete that story or finish that scene in a way that really connects with you. And that's why when you see a movie adaptation of a book, you're always left wanting more, because nothing can compare to what your own mind can create, but also, as you just said, the depth that can be accomplished in a fiction book. And that's again why I don't consider myself an author.
I think a
My
lot of that's just time constraints,
Yeah,
right? Like, whereas at this point, like my favorite form of media would be like the long form story of like the way they did Breaking Bad or Game of Thrones or any of this, where you get all of that character development built in and the really fleshed out universe that this author has fucking made.
every episode's a movie. I mean, every episode is what a 90s movie essentially was able to cover, when the average movie time was about an hour and a half, and you have usually 60 to 90-minute episodes. I actually just started watching Game of Thrones again from season one, episode one, a couple days ago, because my girlfriend and I have been staying home to keep an eye on the dog so
Sure.
much, and she'd never seen it. And we're like, I think we finished the first season. She texted her friend, and she was like, holy shit, like now I get what you were talking about. Like I really am into the show. And I'd watch pieces of it here and there on TV, but I never like watched it in its entirety. And just as you're saying, it's so deep, and the character development can get so complex when you allow that long of a time frame. And it's something that's always fascinated me. I grew up reading a lot of fiction. My mom got me started very early on with classics like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea,
Yeah.
Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, The Invisible Man. The Count of Monte Cristo was probably my favorite book, and still to this day might be, as far as fiction's concerned, because I have such a good memory of it. But I remember almost making a little quasi hammock in my backyard, tying like my old grandmother's quilt between two poles on our playset, and I'd lay in it during the summer and read books. And I remember it was just some musty old mothball blanket, but I'd sit in there and read just books all summer. And I remember reading The Count of Monte Cristo that way and just loving it. And so it's something I definitely plan to move into with my work. I probably have one more nonfiction in me, which is the book I'm working on now. And then I plan to make the leap into fiction, because it's just,
Man, I can't.
it just seems so
That's so
fun
daunting.
too.
It's so daunting to me, the idea of fiction, because like there's no fucking rules.
Yeah. That's what seems awesome though, because I don't like to live my life by rules anyway. And
Right.
so I think there's a lot of I mean, so for example, my history book, fucking history, I recently had to update it literally over the weekend, this past weekend. Some new history came to light, and one of the stories in it was no longer factually accurate.
Oh,
And
interesting.
I had to update it, and my publisher is doing a reissue. Thankfully, we were already on the tail end of the last printing, so they had to reprint anyway. And the timing couldn't have been better, because I wrote him 2 weeks ago and said, "Oh shit, like I need to change this." Um,
What story?
it was a story about a woman. John Singer Sargent painted this portrait of this famous debutante at the time, and the portrait kind of destroyed her career. It was seen as scandalous because he painted her with a dress strap hanging off, and this was in 19th century France. And basically, she was seen as a whore, and her reputation was kind of scarred. And so initially, it was believed that after that, she kind of retired from society and went into hiding for the rest of her life. But it turns out she didn't. She only did it for a span of 7 years, because there is some other portraits of her now readily available that can be seen online, that were, put away in some collections, that show that 7 years after that event, she posed for another painter. And then again, 7 years after that, she posed for another painter. So there's two more portraits of her. And at the time I wrote that, it was probably 2016. I couldn't find anything about this portraits. I didn't see anything, you know, that existed.
Sure.
And so I had to update the story that she didn't retire forever, but she definitely let it affect her for a bit. She kind of went into hiding for 7 years before coming back out and feeling comfortable um, being displayed on canvas again. And so I was able to update that. And my point of bringing that up is what I like about nonfiction is you have the definitiveness of that kind of stuff, but also what I hate about nonfiction is that it can change. And I find the research process of it at times very just painful. And the fiction appeals to me because, like you said, there's no rules. Like no one
Right.
could come to me 5 years later and say, hey, you need to rewrite that chapter. It's like, no, I don't, it's made
That's
up.
not, yeah, that's not how it went down. Like,
um, so it's like it's the same thing. It's almost like anarchy where you're writing without rules, and it can make it more difficult if you don't really know how to rein things in. But I believe if you understand how to present a story and develop characters as a writer, fiction is every writer's ultimate goal. I mean, everyone knows a writer who has like a novel they've been working on for 10 years, or it seems to be anyone creative says they're working on a novel, and you'll hear them talk about that for years because that's what everyone wants to do. Everyone wants to create a world. You almost get to play God in a sense when you're writing a book like that. And it just sounds so fun to me. So it's definitely where
yeah,
I'm going to go.
I find it, we share a lot of similarities on that idea. Mine's always been, I love movies. And so
Yeah.
directors to me are the same thing, like the writer director types, whether that's Wes Anderson or George Lucas or Tarantino or any of these people that
Spielberg. Have you watched that?
exactly right.
Have you watched that
Flesh
documentary on
universe.
Spielberg? Yeah.
No, I haven't.
There's a documentary on Spielberg. I think it's still on Amazon. It's like 2 or 3 hours long. Not to cut you off, but watch that and it'll give you just a completely newfound appreciation for what he does and just the little subtle nuances in the way he shoots things, and he explains kind of meaning behind some of them, and you're just blown away and inspired by what he's been able to create. But
Or
anyway, back to what you're saying
yeah,
about directors.
I love it, right? Like, and one of those things that I'd learned really early on that made me love film was because everything on that screen is created and crafted. That means everything that's on screen has an intention, or it
Mm-hmm.
fucking should. Like at the higher level of directing, I see like whether like especially like a Wes Anderson, right? Like that guy is fully fleshing universes out, like from the style of dress, like to the way things look, to the way snow falls, the way animals look. Like he's not leaving anything up for debate. Like the painting behind the person in the room of the house there
Mm-hmm.
looks like a type of painting that person would choose.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that depth of stuff, I love that full universe creation that people can do. And it made me watch movies a very different way once I started realizing, like, why did they make that choice?
And I think once you've tried to create something yourself, you realize how difficult it is. Even if you're writing a nonfiction book or if you're just doing a short, video for a film class, once you've tried yourself, you realize, holy shit, they are so talented to be able to pull this off at this level. And I don't know if you're a fan of Guillermo del Toro,
Yeah.
but he's probably one of my favorite directors because all of his movies are very distinct. You know they're his movie within the first couple minutes. You can tell he's the one that's directing it.
Well, he's got a time frame he's into
He is good.
because like all of Hellboy stuff
Yeah.
and was it Shape of Water,
Pan's
Pan's
Labyrinth.
Labyrinth is all set like in that post World War II kind of Cold War time.
It's a romantic time period. I mean, there's a reason novelists set a lot of their stories in that time period as well. It's just very romantic, and as humans, we like to romanticize the past.
Why do
We
you think
like
that
to
time period's romantic? Because like
because there's something romantic in turmoil, and there's also it's that the come togetherness that is created, post war or even during a war. Um, as humans, we're kind of attracted to conflict. I think that's why we're obsessed with Rome, and that's also why we're obsessed with the medieval times.
sure.
We like to imagine if we were in that time period, we would be a hero or we would act in a very stoic way. And so it's romantic to see others thrive or struggle because we like to think that we'd be capable of doing that too. That's my opinion on it. So I think that's why a lot of stuff is set in that time period because we don't know. We're too comfortable these days. We don't know what it's like to really struggle. We don't know what it's like to really have to deal with conflict. We don't know what it's like to have to fight for our life every day. And we like to believe that we would. It's the same reason why so many people are obsessed with this idea of a post-apocalyptic world. They like the idea because they're gonna become one of the juggernauts or one of the kings, and it's like, really, you're probably
Yeah.
gonna be one of the first to die.
Yo, I'm
Um,
so into air condition.
but
Like
yeah,
I have
we
so little
like to
interest in
think
that universe.
we like to think that we would kick ass though, and so I think it's the same reason that time period's alluring to us. But also, I think we've lost a lot of appreciation for craftsmanship in terms of architectural style, furniture. It's become very utilitarian. I often refer to it as human storage. When you look at the way apartment buildings are built these days, it's just human storage. And
But
so,
we've also built planned obsolescence in for
mhm,
quite some time now as well. Like we're not planning on someone having furniture that lasts 30 fucking years.
we want to, well, you want it to be replaced every 5 years. And so they have to,
Good
you
business.
get more money out of them. And so I think the older time periods are also attractive, I was going to say, for directors and, masters of photography because it's more attractive. The buildings of that time period are more attractive. The way of dress was more attractive. Even like something as simple as a candlestick looks a hell of a lot cooler on film than an LED light bulb. And so it's us as humans being drawn to beauty, but also being drawn to pain. And so those time periods are just always going to be appealing.
And I think it's easier to look back and think like, well, they had real problems. And
Uh-huh.
and one of those things you said too about there being real problems, these things that people unite after war or any of these type of things. And one of the things that seems pretty true for people globally is we will fucking find conflict, whether there is
Hmm.
conflict or not. We're interested in it. And I think that shows a lot of what we currently have going on in the modern
We
time.
we create it in our own lives. Like people, you
I'll
see
do
a
it
lot of
against
self
myself.
I say you see a lot of self-sabotage because people become so wired and addicted to conflict. It's the excitement of it. And I mean it's a trauma response to, if you grow up in a household that has a lot of conflict between your parents or your siblings, you become attached to that energetic wiring. And so later in life you might be in a relationship that's really healthy and good for you, and you'll find ways to fuck it up and create that conflict because we become addicted to it.
Yeah, I
And
remember with my first marriage, or not that I have a second one, but my previous life. I remember when we first started going out, and like at that point, man, I'm working in bars and bartending, and I think I'm DJing at a strip club, and like life's moving quick. I'm having a good time, doing a variety of shit. And
did you have the strip club DJ hairstyle where you have just the pulled back, just really slick ponytail?
no, I was just bald at the time. I went bald and chubby, but I had to
That's
do the. We're gonna have cinnamon up on two and let her up. We gotta have it on one. She'll be up there with a little bit less on. Put your hands together,
that's strip club DJ esque. I could see Cassidy gonna film with that look.
dude. It was a great job, especially working at a shitty strip club.
Where was this at?
This was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Oh, that's a
Escapades.
yeah. The South has the good strip clubs too. You
Well,
worked at a good one.
we worked at like a 4 out of 10 tops. Eager beats pretty. That was one of our
Uh,
mottos. Uh,
that's true in life though.
that's true in life. And man, like working in that environment, uh, I was so used to just chaos. And when I started going out with my ex-wife, I remember thinking like, oh man, she's boring.
Mm,
And it wasn't that we were boring, is we just weren't yelling at each other all the fucking time. And I didn't know that relationships operated outside of that.
yeah.
Like that we
That's
don't
exactly what I
constantly
was
have to
saying.
fight
We
about shit,
become
right?
we everyone, whether they like to be or not, is a product of their environment to some extent. And if you spend a lot of time in nightlife, um, you become desensitized to stuff that other people would consider wild or crazy. And I
Yep.
experienced this when I was a tour manager and I was touring with some metal bands on the Mayhem Festival. And
Oh, we
I
have very
came back
similar
from
histories.
I came back from tour and I told my friends, I was like, man, like I've become like a savage. Like I have seen the wildest, most fucked up, crazy stuff on a Tuesday night on a tour bus because it was just a night some of the band guys decided to rage. And you come back and you go out to a bar with your friend and like a fight breaks out or like stuff that other people find kind of intoxicating, and
I'll
you're
talk
just like,
about for
this
a
is,
month.
yeah, and you're like, this is so boring to me.
Yeah.
And I came back from tour and I was just so bored of everything that was going on in my hometown. And I actually think it was beneficial to me because it forced me to seek other forms of entertainment. And so for a while, I stopped going out. I didn't really even care to go to bars. They were so boring to me. And I stayed home and I would write instead because I found that more stimulating. And that's kind of when the first history book started to take shape. Is every Sunday I would post what I called a Sunday school lesson. And it was kind of just me tweaking my Mormon upbringing and posting lessons on Sundays that I felt were actually worth learning. And so I would write those on Saturday nights. I'd write them Saturday nights and I'd post them Sunday mornings. And it was largely because I was staying home Saturdays because I didn't want to go out. It was boring to me. So I stayed home and I researched history and I wrote these Sunday school lessons, and I did those every Sunday for a while. And I had enough of them that my father convinced me to compile them into a book. And that became the first edition of fucking history, which later got bought out by a large publisher, and we reissued it twice the size and a bunch more additional topics. And so the fact that I lost an interest in what other people considered wild or fun was very beneficial in my career. And it's kind of something that I've gone through once again, being a dad and having my son now who's 14 months old. I don't go out nearly as much as I used to. And when I do, I'm bored. I'll
Yeah.
be at a bar with a buddy and I'll be like, why am I here? Like, I'd rather be home watching my kid throw stuff around the house because he's just having a crazy day. It's just more enjoyable for me to watch him just be a little maniac.
Well, and it's a new
And
experience, right?
and
Like
it's
the
new,
bar thing isn't
exactly.
new. Like that,
It's
I remember feeling that. I remember
yeah,
feeling
yeah.
that
And
very specifically.
you stated it perfectly. It's new. Like, and I'm able to draw more creativity from that than I would going out. And it's just proof positive that as humans, you are not meant to do the same thing forever. And
No
I think
way, no matter what it is.
a lot of people get trapped in their reputation in the sense that, I mean, I was known as the wild friend. Like when I went out, people were like, oh, shit's going
Yeah.
to go down. This is where my captain nickname originated from. My friends called me the captain because they said going out with me was like getting on a boat and waiting for it to sink, because
Oh no.
you knew that Kyle was just going to steer it into an iceberg because that's what I did. I thought it was enjoyable to see what I could, get into when I was, heavily fucked up. And so people get stuck in those kind of reputations. And when I first stopped going out and I started kind of putting my writing first, a lot of people would be like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Why aren't you coming out? And it's because you're changing the definition they have of you. And it's uncomfortable for them because now you seem somewhat unpredictable, or they can't rely on you to help them perpetuate their negative behaviors. And so anytime you have to grow and evolve and reinvent yourself, you're going to lose people. And I have friends that I thought were really good friends at the time, and now, 8, 9 years later, I haven't talked to them at all. We
You
don't
know,
talk anymore.
I've reframed that a lot. I've reframed that a lot, man, because I had a period where I tour managed and toured tour managed for a friend's band and did all that. And we were
What band was it?
Merriweather was the name of the bands. We'd made it. We got signed by like Interscope, and we'd played a few Warp tours and opened for
Okay,
some
so
big
you were in
stuff.
the exact same scene, like that
Oh yeah,
alternative rock metal scene.
yeah, having a fucking ball.
Yeah,
Mostly driving a van, helping sell merch, and making sure we get paid at the end of the night.
yeah. That's tour
Typical,
manager
whatever.
life.
Yeah, right. It's very glamorous. Uh, And then after that, like ended, and then I did the regular career for a while, and then have switched again. Like, and then even when I was competing and traveling in that, like my brother competed with me, so I got to travel around the world with my brother for like fucking 8 or 9
Was this when
years.
you were doing the Highland Games
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah.
Okay.
So once I got into Highland Games, my brother was a professional in it as well. We got to travel around the world together, and like my 8 or 10 dudes that I was really close with, that I competed with, when I got hurt, you stop hearing from those people and you
Hmm.
stop seeing them. And it's easy to get that feeling of like the people I thought were homies, you see them fade. And I don't think that it takes away from the quality of friend they were whenever I was in the same zone, but we have now different interests.
I would
And
agree
like,
with that. What I was basically saying is a lot of people just wanted to do drugs with me.
yes.
And those are the people that aren't like, there's a bonding that happens when people get fucked up together. It's
Yeah, it
not,
does.
but it's not a very serious bond, but it feels like it at the time. Like you feel like now you're in on this secret together, or you share like this, this dirty little habit together. And it makes you feel almost bonded to that person. And so when I say like I had friends I thought were really good, it's realizing they were just party friends. Like the only time we ever talked or hung out was either planning to go out or when we were out, or next day kind
Mm,
of laughing about all the shit we got ourselves into. Um, it wasn't real friendship. It was friendship that was basically just connected over a mutual desire to escape our lives in a certain way. But I totally agree with what you're saying. Like I have friends that I still consider great friends. We don't talk anymore, but if someone asked, I would still consider them a friend. And at the time, it was very beneficial for both of us to know each other. And we had like great talks and great support, and we helped each other work through things. And you just kind of drift apart. And it's a part of life. And I don't even know where I was going with this. I completely lost my train of thought. But
all right.
I agree with what you were saying, is all I'm saying.
Yeah. Man, I think so with my podcast here being not dead yet, a big change for me came once my throwing career really ended. And it kind of ended abruptly, right? Like I knew that it would come to an end at some point, but then because of the injury and thing, then it kind of shut off. And all I could see in front of me was a very normal life. That like all the excitement part of getting to tour manage and travel and competing and doing all this, like that window was shut. And then as I've come out of being hurt and kind of taken the reins, man, I just realized that, like the door was never closed. Like it's just a matter of doing it and deciding to bet on yourself. And so someone like
I
you,
was I was gonna say your life doesn't appear normal at all.
not anymore. No, no, I've fully fucking leaned in to whatever the insanity of creating your own universe is. And
Yeah.
guys like you who decide I'm going to bet on my own writing,
Hmm.
and then I'm going to go ahead and put together this book tour. And I think those are the big lessons that a lot of people wanting to build this life can't see the history that got you to step 730, which is still reaching out on your own to find places, to host a thing, to bring people in, and a little bit of support from a publisher of getting books to it. Like it's still on
Yeah.
you the whole time.
And I'm at a point in my career where a lot of people would assume I have a personal assistant, or they would assume I have someone managing things for me. I mean, my publisher's Penguin Random House. That is the
Yeah.
biggest publisher in the world. And even with that publishing deal, like you said, I am still DMing or reaching out to bookstores on my own because I wanted to make it happen. And I don't have an assistant that manages my schedule. I'm a team of one, and I've had people reach out to me multiple times and say, who is it that writes all this stuff? Like, how many people think the captain is just some overarching persona that is supported by multiple writers? And it's like, no, this is just me. This
Just
is
me,
all me.
baby.
I'm a one. I am a captain without a crew, per se. I write everything myself. I mean, even for my event in LA, I designed the flyer for the event myself. I'm very much still doing everything I can to keep my career moving forward. And like you said, I wouldn't have thought at this stage I would still be doing that. I would have kind of thought I could have gotten comfortable and sat back on my hands And I'm glad I haven't been able to. And I think the lockdowns and all the shit that happened the past 2 years might have played some role in that. I don't know if my career would be in a different place, but it definitely made me have to get scrappy again and get
Yeah.
hungry and figure out ways to make shit happen on my own, as opposed to just sitting back and waiting for opportunities to come to me.
And man, and I think that lesson alone, like that's one that I got from the athletics thing is like after doing it for so long, you're still just trying to maximize potential. And whether
Mm-hmm.
that's change my nutrition a little bit, lose a little weight, get faster here, whatever it is, it's getting fucking scrappy to continue to make progress when you're at a limit. And being able to transfer that over into my life, my relationships, work, business, any of that, and realize that the real skill that I'm bringing to the table is I'll fucking figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's where I know that I show up well. And I see that like with the other entrepreneurs in this creative space now. And whether it is doing what you're doing or video content or people who do more graphic design, like, the people out there hustling, they are finding work. That work is not finding them.
And I think, I don't know if you believe in this or not, but the whole law of attraction kind of way of living, I find that the more I hustle and try to find work, I have random opportunities that come to me that just seem like out of nowhere. Like right before this call, I just got a text from an old friend asking me if I would speak at an event in Denver at the end of September. And it's a charitable event to raise awareness for mental health. And I just keep getting opportunities like every week. I feel like I get two or three of these opportunities that seem to just come out of the ether and they just come out of the blue. And I truly believe it's because I am trying to do as much as I can on my own. And I have this belief that if I put the work in, things are going to come back to me. Because I've noticed at times in my life when I haven't done that, when I have allowed myself to get comfortable, it seems like the whole well just dries up. Um, Even though I have like a large contract or I'm very comfortable financially at that point, it just seems like when I stop putting in the work, the universe stops rewarding me with work that I wasn't anticipating having. And so
And then that's
it's
where
something
I get dangerous mentally.
um it's something that I still struggle with at times. I mean, it's very easy to get frustrated. And then I think I like what you said when you talked about the athletic career kind of going away, that all you saw for yourself was a normal life and it scared you, because that is exactly what I felt when I found out I was going to be a dad.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
when I heard I was going to be a dad, I mean, at the time, my girlfriend and I were on the rocks. We actually kind of broke up the day before we found out we were going to have him. And
That's how people
it,
say most of this should go.
it wasn't a good time for us. And a lot of it was due to my ego. And a lot of it was, like I said, the well dried up for me in 2020 and 2021 because a lot of my life was dependent upon travel and hospitality and stuff like that. And so I just felt really down in the dumps. And then when I found out I was going to be a dad, I thought, oh shit, I don't see a way to get this lifestyle back that I had or that I was living. And it put me in a bad place for a while. And it put me really deep in a hole of feeling that kind of woe is me mentality. But once I shook that off, and like you said, I got scrappy and I got hungry and I decided to kind of create the life that I wanted. I am more independent now and I am more free financially, and I have so much more work coming at me than I ever had before. And my son last week just took his 34th flight at 14 months old. So even though I have a kid, we've still been traveling like crazy. We've still been all over. He comes to all my speaking gigs with me. He comes on all my little tours with me. Um, and it's been great because now I have a life that's honestly more rewarding because I'm a father and I get to watch all these experiences through my son's eyes, but as well as my own. But I also am far more successful.
Well, but you've
I
also
know
now crafted that universe that
Mm-hmm.
that you have the ability to say, yeah, I know it costs us extra money for my family to travel with me, but that's what I'm doing.
And it actually doesn't cost me extra money because I have a companion pass on Southwest,
Oh,
which
well,
allow
yeah, same.
which but but I fly
Hotels,
Southwest.
food, X, Y, and
Yeah,
Z. Right? Like,
I fly Southwest. Like I'm not flying, first class or anything. Like I'm still being scrappy about it. But every one of my last book that came out outsold the previous book. I know my next book's going to outsell that book. And I know that everything's just going to continue going up, up, and up if I keep just, architecting my life the way that I wanted it to be. And I always wanted a life that was filled with travel and new experience and novelty, but I always wanted the commitment and comfort of family. I just didn't think I could have both at the same time. I was very much a typical New Yorker when I lived there in the sense that I was just like career is everything. You can't have a family relationship. You want to be successful. You have to work 70 hours a week. And it just fucking destroyed me mentally because it felt like I had to give up one thing to kind of have an inkling of another thing.
do you think that a
And
lot of that was environmental, just being in the city and the pace of it, and like the people you're around all kind of have that?
it could be, but I also think it was just me being very susceptible to my environment. I didn't have the mindset I do now where you could put me on a fucking island in the middle of nowhere, and as long as I have a Wi-Fi connection, I'll find a way to write and create books.
Yep.
Um, I used to feel like I had to be in certain areas and feed off energy to be creative, and I've just come to the conclusion that it's all within me. I just have to tap into it when I really need it. And when I was living in New York, I was working in advertising. My finances and career were largely dependent upon other people accepting me, hiring
Mm.
me, putting work in front of my face. Whereas now I say no to as many projects as I say yes to. I'm very selective with what I do with my time because if it's something that's going to take me away from writing a book or working on my own creative craft, it better be fucking worth my time and enjoyable. And so the things I do accept are things I actually really want to be a part of, really cool projects. I worked on a project with the Getty last year, which was kind of a really cool mix of my love for history with my advertising experience. And projects like that didn't come to me until I left advertising full time and I just completely bet on myself and I made my own connections, I made my own network, and I focused on just every day doing something that I felt was going to have a payoff in the future, kind of like priming the well. It wasn't going to pay off that day, but I knew 6 months or a year from now something was going to come from it. And I still have that mentality where I'm playing the long game on everything in my life, particularly now that I'm a father, because I want to leave behind a legacy of some sort. And it's that analogy people have with that 5 year bamboo, how you water it every day for 5 years, and then finally one day it starts growing like crazy. I feel my career is on the cusp of that with what I have going on. That all this legwork I've been putting in and being scrappy and flying Southwest and
How
doing my
long
own
have you
flyer.
felt that it's on the crest?
Probably about 6 months.
Okay, cool.
Um, I didn't feel it for a long time. I was very content in just getting my monthly paychecks from projects that were hiring me. But about 6 months ago is when I started to feel like I was on the cusp of something big. And I've said this on other podcasts. For the first time in my life, I feel that I'm meant for more. And I feel that this power and impact that I have and this audience of support that I've garnered over the years, there's more to do with it than I have up to this point. And there's something impactful that I can do. I don't know what that thing is yet, but what matters is that I believe that I can do it. And so I'm very open to all these new experiences and taking on these new opportunities like these speaking gigs that are typically ones that I wouldn't engage with because I want to remain open enough to find out what my impact's going to be. And I know that when I discover it, it's going to be something very substantial.
How has how has going from being, a writer where you get such time to prep and do all that, right? And then switching that to speaking engagements where you have to be now not only this, you have to be the speaker of it, right? Like you actually have to be
Hmm.
I guess fuck, speaker. That's the word.
The voice.
Orator.
Um, I actually feel like I'm a better speaker than I am a writer a lot of the time, which is
Okay.
odd because I've made my career on writing.
Well, yeah, this whole
Um,
other avenue that's going to open up. That's great.
I tend to believe, like, especially when it comes to tweets or stuff that's character restricted online, I know that if I could have an opportunity to speak with someone about it, I could articulate it much better. And so it's felt incredibly natural. And it's honestly been kind of a relief to do the Q&A portion after I speak because it allows me to elaborate on things that I might not have gotten the chance to say when I was just doing the speaking part of the engagement. And so it's been great. And it's been something that I'm going to lean into a lot. And it's probably not going to become my main forte in the sense that I don't want to become, some guy that's just speaking engagement after speaking engagement. I still want to write. That's still my primary goal in life is to write really good books. But it's been, like I said, very motivating to be able to do that in person with people through speech
Yeah.
as opposed to because I'm not in the room with people when they read my book. I'm not in the room with someone when they read something I post online. But to be in the room with them and watch them react it's been awesome.
Yeah. Getting a chance to actually see in person people that resonate with your material is
Yeah.
very eye opening to who your actual audience is
Hmm.
and
It's like
comparative to thinking who you think they are.
it's like they say about stand-up comedy. You can't do stand-up comedy without an audience. Like you need an audience to be a good stand-up comic. And I think it was Joe Rogan talking about this recently, talking about during the pandemic, some comedians were doing Zoom acts, and he said even really good comedians, like it was fucking awful to
Awful.
watch because without an audience, you can't engage, you can't connect.
And look, man, I'm glad that there's dudes out there who's like, we're getting scrappy. We got to try something.
Yeah.
And they're like,
I
this
mean,
ain't it. This
exactly.
ain't
They were
fucking
trying.
it.
They were trying, and there was those drive-through comedy shows too, where people would drive through in their cars, and a comedian would be up on stage, and same thing. You can't see the way someone's reacting in a car. You're not gonna be able to get, the
No, you're
vibe
just
that you
talking to
need.
cars. That's a
Yeah, it just
weird.
just seems
We've
odd.
entered a very interesting time, and I think, as the pendulum shifts, one of those things I think even interesting we talked about, like with your history book, right? Like even this, the artist and the painting and the kind of repercussions of her living this life.
Yeah.
That shit's not that long ago, as far as
No,
humans
200
are,
years.
right? No time at all. Like 6 people,
Hmm.
basically, and I start to now look at things like big pendulum shifts over centuries
Hmm.
and like what about 1,000 years looks like. And I find that really interesting that we've come into this really interesting time right now of information where we're not evolved enough as a species to manage the tools that we've created. Like we know that we're such a, with communication, right? Like 99% of your communication is done non-verbally. And we've transferred to being a text-based society. And that creates that like the words that you write are there and really concrete, and I can read them in the context and mood that I'm in, and I can create whatever character and narration voice. A lot of people read books in a voice that's an authoritative form from someone of their childhood, not the author.
Hmm.
And I think that leaves so much interesting interpretation up for material that people can get offended and focus on it and fixate on it and say, you meant this when you said that, instead of, because you looked at me in my eyes and heard the tone of my voice, you realized it was a joke. Like you can hear
Oh,
more, it's trouble to get intention through solely in a
well,
text based.
you see this happen just with your friends when you text them something and they get offended by it, and you're like, "Whoa," or like if your significant other, if you're having an argument and then one of you leaves the house and you continue that argument over text messaging, it's just going to get
Awful.
astronomically worse because you can't read all the nuance you're talking about. And I find it both very motivating as a writer to know that the world is shifting very hard towards words.
Hmm.
But at the same time, as a human, I find it very scary because, like you said, a lot of stuff gets lost in translation. And there's stuff that I've tweeted that has kind of got the mob after me for a while. I mean, I hate to use the term, but there's been, times when cancel culture has tried to take its effect on me,
It's hard when no one pays your bills.
right? But I'm a firm believer in the fact that you have to allow that to happen to yourself. You have to allow yourself to be canceled, or you have to allow yourself to be taken out of context to that extent. And so when things have happened where my words have been taken out of context, if it's something that I truly believe doesn't represent me, I'll generally follow up and kind of further explain myself. But if it's just someone getting offended by a word, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. There's about a 72-hour rule on that stuff. In 3 days, they'll move on to someone else.
No one cares.
And
Yep.
I just continue doing what I'm doing. And I know at times like that is when it's very important to know who you are as a person. Because I think what happens with online accusations is it brings up fear and anxiety that we have in ourselves. And we worry, are we this kind of person? Are we a bad person? Are we who they're portraying us to be? And if you're not sure of yourself, if you're not confident in what you meant or what you were intending to do, it's very easy to be almost manipulated into believing that you are a bad person. And that's kind of what.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you there that it's really easy for the mob or whatever it is to convince you that perhaps your intention wasn't what you said.
And so if you are sure of yourself, you just got to stick it out. You have to stick it out. And it's the same confidence in yourself that's required to be any kind of entrepreneur, because you're going to get people trying to almost manipulate you into believing your ideas are bad or that you're wasting your time. And you have to believe in what you're doing enough to just keep fucking going. And like we've been saying throughout this podcast, get scrappy and do things yourself. And it's the long game. You have to play the long game. And social media has destroyed the long game mentality for a lot of people, because you see a lot of individuals online that have sudden rise to fame, or they claim they have.
Sure.
And you have these people in their 20s that are flexing on Lambos and yachts and stuff. And people think if they're not on that level, they're behind. I can tell you, and you probably know this from your own personal experience because you probably ran some of the same circles. So much of that is absolute bullshit. People have no fucking idea.
I don't know how many people I've seen post with fucking cars that ain't theirs.
Oh my God. And I can tell you, I know I have friends that are very successful, and they know, these other individuals personally. And, for example, a lot of it I think this is the big issue with the life coaching world. I have a big issue with that. I have an issue with that world because I think majority of life coaches shouldn't be life coaches. I think they're failed entrepreneurs in their own right. I think they're people that sucked at other things, but they're very good at presenting themselves in a way that looks successful.
Sure.
And it helps if you're attractive and in good shape. And I think it's largely predatory. And you see this often in this life coaching realm, these people telling you, oh, I can help you get this, I can help you get that. You got to pay me $10,000 a month. And I know some of these people through connections, and I know their life is shit. And I know that it's largely a fake life. And the fact that they feel they are in a position to tell other people how to achieve success that they themselves haven't reached, it really irks me. And it's almost what I experienced in college, where I had professors in business school that were teaching us how to run a business or market that had done nothing but taught their whole life.
Right.
They'd never actually ran a business. And I had one teacher in particular I always seemed to be butting heads with, and I was 21 at the time. And he gave me, I think, a C or a D on one of my papers. And it was a paper that I knew should have been an A. It was like a case study or something. And I was arguing with him after class, and I told him, I can't remember his name. I said, I looked up your salary online. I know how much you make as a teacher, and I make more than you, and I'm 21. So don't tell me how to operate business.
What a 21-year-old thing to tell a guy to. Like,
Right?
you know what I mean?
It's very much and you think it's like something that, at 21, you're like, oh, I got him.
Right.
But it is still very indicative of the culture we have now, where you have these people life coaching or teaching that have never actually done what they're talking about.
Or fucking anything.
And it sucks for the 5% that truly are good at what they do. It sucks for the ones that really do care, that really have accomplished something and have things to share with the world. Social media has just made it far too easy to come across as an expert, when in reality,
recently I've noticed on social media, especially podcasting and doing anything else now, is because the format of like responding and saying a thought as an answer to a podcast question is such a valuable clip, that people will just go to a studio and fake answer questions. And
I know exactly what you're talking about.
They're not on a fucking podcast. It blew me the fuck away when I realized that was happening. I'm like, what the fuck?
I know what you're talking about.
Like, what show is this from? Like, none? You just fucking, like, who are you talking to?
They'll even like look away.
Yeah, oh yeah,
they're talking
100%.
And like they'll be sitting in a chair with a mic in front of them, and they'll look away as though they're talking to the host. I know these clips.
No, they're not on a fucking podcast. There's places you just go rent out by the hour.
It's the stuff that rubs me wrong, and I wrote
fucking rubs me wrong too, because like, no one asked you this information.
Right. I wrote something recently where I said, we can learn more from cockroaches than we can most life coaches. And that lesson is just be hard to kill. And I think it's very appropriate on your podcast. Most life coaches aren't going to teach you shit that you don't already know. They're just going to hold you accountable. And once you can learn to hold yourself accountable, the real secret to life is just being hard to kill, in the sense that be hard to stop, be hard to be talked out of your goals, be hard to be manipulated, and just have that tunnel vision on what you want to do and find ways to make it happen and ignore the fucking noise.
And also understand that no one has to support it.
Yeah.
Yo, you don't need a bunch of other people to back this thing.
No one supports cockroaches. People fucking hate cockroaches, but they just keep living. They keep coming back. And I don't know, they might be my new spirit animal now that I think about it. They got their shit together.
Dude, I find, like, once I kind of took on and accepted like total accountability is where I felt like things changed a lot for me, was just the idea that my life is what it is and what it will become solely based on what I fucking make of it. There isn't any outside factors. There's just shit that I have to figure out. And that no one can believe in my dreams more than me. That's a fucking rule.
It's the truth. And I think what's hard for people about accepting that is it forces them to also accept the fact that they've always had the ability. And it's a reason why I've talked about this on another podcast. A lot of my work is very self-empowering. A lot of what I write is meant to empower you to think for yourself, act for yourself, do for yourself. And it blows my mind how often that is met with negative reactions.
Right.
And it's because people
amazing how many people feel attacked.
People don't want to know they're capable, because as soon as you accept the fact that you're in control, you have to also accept the responsibility for everything that's happened up to that point.
Goddamn right.
And that's a lot of regret people aren't willing to deal with. And
or maybe not even responsibility, but at least the awareness of that happened and I can't fucking do anything about it now. What I can do is not do that again. And what I can do is choose where my energy forward goes. You know, I talk about it with people like, I'm not making any of my fucking decisions looking in the rearview mirror. Like, I want to see where I'm fucking headed and stay focused on what is in front of me with building instead of trying to be reactionary all the time or based on what has happened in the past. That is data to help steer the ship.
I like that, but the problem with being a writer is a lot of my my inspiration comes from what's happened in the past, and so it at times it has been a major detriment to me to write the way that I do. Particularly in 2019, I had a really hard go with depression, and I was just dwelling on everything that I felt I'd fucked up, and I would write a lot of stuff from it at the same time. I would be, reminiscing or ruminating is a better word on the stuff in my past, and I'd be like, okay, here's how I could have fixed it, and then I would take that and turn into something I would write, and so I felt like it was beneficial almost to sit and dwell on it as long as I did. But then on the flip side of it, I just beat myself up so bad that I fell into this real deep hole of depression and had to take a long break from social media, and I had to kind of reinvent the way I engaged with people online, not really focusing on my DMs as much. I try not to answer every comment anymore. Um, a lot of the time I try to post and ghost. I try to kind of post
Sure.
and get out of there before it weighs me down too much, because I do internalize a lot of that stuff, because I try to process it into creative feel. And so during that internalization process, it can kick my ass. And so the idea of not making decisions based on the rear view is largely the right idea, but it's something I struggle with because I do find a lot of benefit in looking back. And, even recently,
I
the
guess I don't
past
want to
month,
argue with the past. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just want to view it.
well, and the other way to look at it is it's okay to visit the past, but don't live there. You're a traveler, not a resident of the past. And so visit it, learn from it, view it, but get the fuck out. Go get your passport stamped somewhere else and move on. Um,
Well, I think we've also come from a culture, man, that is built so firmly on this idea that at 25, like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing with your life. You're behind, you're failing, and like, oh, you're 30, you're not 10 years into a career that you're going to retire from at 65 and do all these things, instead of it just being this open transitional point that life always is.
who the fuck wants to retire anyway?
Yo,
Like, I have no desire to retire. I think
I like what I do. I don't have a job. I like
exactly.
working.
Like, what I do is so much purpose. I'm always going to do it. Retiring is what you do when you've worked in a factory for 45 years and you never really pursued something that you were passionate about.
Well, which is what our
And
country was built on. Like, whether the
and it's
education system is built to put people in a fucking room that they don't talk and they follow orders to move into cubicles and accept that that's the thing to do. Like, the whole education system sets us up for doing that for a really long time. But as those jobs go away,
and that's why you need those few good rogue professors, or the good actual,
educators
experts
that fucking rock your boat.
educators. Because I had a really good professor in college that was all for encouraging me to take my own path and pursue something completely out of the norm. Like, he was a fantastic professor, and those are just rare. The large majority of them are part of the academia think tank, and they always will just stay in that. Like, how do we keep people in this machine to keep getting our salaries and keep funding
grants or whatever it is they're chasing? Oh no. Oh no. Come back through. There we go.
Oh, my power went out for a second.
Oh shit.
Yeah, my power's still out in my house, but I think my phone switched over to the 5G network instead of my Wi-Fi, so we should be able to keep this going for a bit. I'm in South Miami, but okay. I see a truck over here on a power line. It's a perfect sunny day, and I think they might have fucked something up.
I've got a friend down there who's great that I may try to intro you to.
Let's definitely connect.
Yeah.
But I'm glad I took this on my phone and not my laptop because now we can continue on
That were
this
sweet, dude.
this network. So, but what I like that you brought up is talking about how if by 25 you don't have it figured out, you feel like you're lost, because this is something I talk about often. And the example I like to use, and this is from my book Fucking History, is Vincent van Gogh. Everyone knows who Van Gogh is. Van Gogh didn't start painting until he was 28 years old.
Right.
He didn't even, before that, he was fucking up on everything in life. He tried to be a pastor, he tried to be a teacher. You know, he got in a fight and got his ear cut off and then gave his ear to a prostitute. Like, he was a fucking wreck of a human. And even as an artist, he was. But between 28 and 37, so over a 9-year span, when he died at 37, he painted over 2,000 works of art. So at 28 years old, he figured out, this is what I'm going to do. And even while he was alive, no one bought his work, no one supported his work. But in that 9-year span of just identifying what he really wanted to do with his life, he created a fucking legacy.
Yeah.
And when I've spoken at colleges in the past, I always tell that story of Van Gogh, because that is the age when a lot of kids feel they need to have it together. And it, particularly now with social media, when you look at these, you know, these kids that think they can just be content creators and they're just going to make money traveling the world, and that's just so far from the fucking truth.
The problem is it is a thing now. Like, that's a fucking job now. That didn't exist, but it is a thing.
Very, very small amount of people that can do that. And I'm not trying to talk any.
I got in. I'm first generation.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that's a really interesting change that we've had. Like, prior to this, and whenever I started traveling and doing content or doing any of that, I remember like, oh man, if one of my nephews or someone said that this is what they wanted to pursue for a living, I'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? But now, like, the cat's out of the bag. Like, we're never going back to this isn't a job.
Yeah. And I'm not trying to talk people out of it. I'm trying to say that just because you see other people in their 20s that seem to be living this life and have their shit together and you're not,
right,
it doesn't mean you're fucking up.
No comparison, dude.
There's plenty of time to. I think the most important thing in life is to allow yourself to feel lost, but don't ever feel like it's over. And a lot of people, when they get lost, they feel like it's all over. It's okay to feel lost, because that's how you find something else. And so if you're lost in your 20s, as long as you're still trying to actively find something, that's what you need to do. That means you're on the right path.
I think a lot of people sit and wait for it to find them, or think it will, because most people, by the time once they're let out on their own, let's say they get out of college, right? And now they're 23 years old, have their degree. Most of the point of that, like, time, they haven't chose the path really at all. They've shown up to a place, they've done what they were told. They provide the required material that a teacher asked, or the boss asked, or whoever it was. Their parents said, these are the expectations. But once they get to a point and it's like, well, now do you? And they're like, I don't know who the fuck I am or anything I'm into. I've only just done the things I've been pointed at thus far that say, everyone has said, you're doing great. And I've followed that path. And then you reach a point where you go, fuck, I'm 30 in a job I fucking hate.
Yeah.
That pays enough, but I've already had a kid, and like, people are terrified to backwalk to make the further progress, and they'll just fucking lock it in forever.
Mm-hmm. If I was to go through it all again with what I know now, I probably wouldn't go to college. I would definitely just get right into something that I love. But going to college is what helped me discover my love of writing. So I don't regret going to school, because I don't use my degree. I've never really used my degree. I don't even know where the fuck my degree is.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
My parents framed it for me when it came in the mail, and it got put in a box somewhere, and I don't know where it is. But going to school helped me discover what I wanted to do. And I think the important lesson of that is I just remained open. I remained open to discovering something I really wanted. And so whether you go to school, because I'm not a proponent of like never go to school. Like, I think there's this hard line where there's this hard line of people that are like, oh, fuck college, don't go to college.
Hey, man.
I think if you want to go to college and there's something you want to pursue there, I think it's healthy and I think it's good to attempt. Know what you're getting into. Don't do it with a burden of debt because that stuff will fucking sink you later in life. But remain open to being lost and finding new ways. And that's even like now in my career when I made a pivot from nonfiction to the recent two books I just wrote are children's books. It was something new for me and it was difficult, even though they were short and you think children's books are very simple. It's hard to articulate a good lesson in that format. And it was completely new for me and I loved it. And I'm probably going to do more children's books in the
Is
future.
it because you
And
have to use like such an economy of words and like such a clarity quickly?
yeah, and it's a way of making it has to be entertaining for the parent, but it also has to be something that the child can interpret. And it's towing that line of making sure the parent wants to read it to their kid, but the kid also connects it enough that they want to have the parent read it to them again, you know. And it's what I try and do with my career. The point I'm making is I remain open to all sorts of new ways of writing and new projects. And even though I have a very definitive mindset of I'm going to write for a living, I'm open to writing all sorts of shit.
Well, why not? Like I remember,
Yeah.
and I think that's an interesting change, man, because I recognized it as well for myself that, originally, I guess what got me started, I started writing a blog. Then that turned into, I wrote a couple books. And one of the things in the books I wrote about was this personal philosophy of the hate. And then people asked me for shirts. Then we started making fucking shirts. And 9 years later, I'm doing apparel. And because I was doing apparel, the YouTube thing supported it. So I continued doing that. And it's led to a lot of just doing everything: podcasts, the YouTube, still writing, still doing apparel. I like doing a lot of things. And so it's now boiled down to like what makes me happy is I want to fucking create.
Exactly.
I don't give a fuck what I'm creating, whether that's connection, whether that is creating new content that can inspire someone, whether that is pushing myself to be uncomfortable with making hard content to make, like whether that's recently we did a travel show where I was the host for Indian motorcycles.
That I saw clips of that and that looks badass actually.
Dude, had such a ball doing it. I got to do 3 trips this year of like 6-day 1,000-mile motorcycle journeys.
That's awesome.
And hosting it, and like not to mention the production side of that is me, my guy Brant, who's my media guy, another guy I know that I'd hired who I'd worked with in the past, and then one guy from Indian, like helping us keep a story alive. And so I've got to play a middle game there of not only finding 4 people who have the free time or interesting enough, will ride a motorcycle 1,000 miles and show up, like for each of those trips, who aren't paid, by the way. Like, hey, do you just want to come do this? And like, we're going to film 16 hours a day and it's going to fucking be rough. Like it was a fucking lot, man, to like be on that side of it and be like, oh man, balancing the frustration of production, but not sharing it with the people that I'm on the side of the trip with, because I can't also be fun host that they want to talk to and crack the whip on production.
It's a good insight into individuals like Anthony Bourdain.
God damn it, dude. No one, I'm so attracted to that guy and have been for so long. I imagine we share a lot of that.
That was the one passing of a celebrity that really affected me because I had identified with Anthony in so many ways. And what you're talking about, it reveals the loneliness of that style of show, because even though you're out there with your buddies, like you said, you're not really connecting with them because you have the focus of being the host. And he talked about this in one episode where he said, is it better to be somewhere beautiful alone and have no one to share it with? Or is it better to have someone to share things with and not be in a place so beautiful? And he was talking about, he was in like some villa in Italy eating on a balcony, but it was just him eating by himself on a balcony. And it just dawned on me, it just hit me while you were talking about it. the level at which he probably dealt with that, because I know his travel schedule was something like 275 days out of the
Mm.
year he was
I,
filming, and
I
it
thought
was
about that.
international travel. It was all international travel. Um,
We did 3 of those trips this year, and like that's fully what fucked me up.
it
Like because I'm
seems,
also still running
yeah,
my other businesses. Like that's I'm doing all of it, and yeah, it just fucking crashed me. It just fucking burned me out, and I just got to thinking. I'm like, Bourdain did 12 or 14 of these episodes a year for like
and
fucking 2 decades. You fucking monster.
they were like hard episodes. Like that's like the international travel he did. Um, was incredibly taxing alone. And then to do that and have to be on camera and to have to present in a way, but then also still trying to be a father when he was at that stage in his life. It just seems, I just can't even explain about how hard that would be to pull off. And it makes so
Dude.
much sense when you think about it, and what you've gone through and what we've talked about over the past few weeks in between, connecting. It's just,
So I recently started rewatching A Cook's Tour. So like his
oh
very
yeah, when
first
he was kind
show.
of like awkward at first. I've watched
Yeah.
those ones.
And so
Yeah.
like rewatching it now, again, like we have such a thought of Bourdain at this point,
Yeah.
of like this fucking almost elder statesman
Yeah.
of fucking travelers. And like you see
Yeah.
that guy who's uncomfortable on camera and doesn't know what he's doing, and they're with the skeleton crew. And you can see progress. You can see how much fucking better he got at this.
Hmm.
And I love that part, like to realize that, like, oh, this is the first time I've ever done one of these. Of course, we're not good at it.
So from what I understand, because I know people that have worked with him, some of the people I actually work with now were, you know, in his team members.
Wow.
Um, when he pivoted over to, what was the first show? It was like No Reservations. Then he pivoted to Parts Unknown.
Yeah. So there was
Is that
Cook's Tour, No Reservations, and then Parts Unknown.
when he pivoted to Parts Unknown, he viewed himself as a journalist,
Yes.
and he was very intentional in telling stories in the most accurate light possible. And so he had this added burden he put on himself of making sure that he always knew the politics of the region. He always knew the right questions to ask. And if he didn't get the right storyline out of it, he wanted to reshoot, he wanted to refilm, because he wanted to tell the story so accurately. When you combine all of that, it is just such a taxing process to take on. But like you said, you can watch that progression to where the Cook's Tour is obviously very much just about enjoying himself. Um,
But at some
no
point, it's
reserve,
boring.
no, what's that?
At some point, it's fucking boring. Like we
Exactly.
talked about earlier. Like next chapter, dude. This isn't
That's
hard anymore.
exactly that's exactly where I was going with this. You picked up what I was putting down. And then he started getting into No Reservations, where he focused a little more on the people and the food. And then by the time it was Parts Unknown, he had a very defined purpose for what he wanted to do. He wanted to really tell stories, and he wanted to impact change. Ultimately, is what he wanted to do. He found a purpose in that, and that's what fueled him enough to keep that arduous travel schedule up. Obviously, it took its toll, but it goes right in line with what we're saying. You look at guys like Anthony, and from the outside looking in, that guy lived the life. Like that guy had the fucking life. He traveled on a TV budget, so he was not staying anywhere cheap. He was traveling very well, and
And had
he
for
ate
decades.
delicious. He ate delicious meals. He met really interesting people, and anybody would think that is the life. But it goes to show you that outside looking in is very rarely accurate. And that's kind of been the theme throughout our whole conversation, whether we're talking about our own lives when we were tour managers, you were a strip club DJ, and I was going out often, to, the life coach trying to trick you into
Mhm.
believing they can help you. The outside looking in is very rarely accurate. And that's something that people need to keep in mind at all times. And that again bodes the importance of understanding yourself first and foremost. Like you have to know what you represent, what you're made of, and what you want to stand for. So then when all these external forces kind of start to weigh on you, You have yourself to fall back on, and it's that accountability and that self-responsibility that you have to have.
Man, through the Bourdain thing, like when you touched on, like, I've had two celebrity deaths really fucking bum me out. One was Bowie, and the other being Bourdain. And Bowie just, I mean, who's cool for fucking 60 years?
Bourdain.
Fuck, right. At least my definition of cool.
Yeah.
And the Bourdain one, man, I remember one thing I'd found on it that really hit home. Are you familiar with David Cho?
Yeah.
Oh, he's fucking great. Another just, I'm so attracted to just lunatics. And David Cho's one of them, man. His show on Hulu, his interview show is fucking phenomenal.
I haven't watched any of that. I didn't even realize it existed.
Oh,
now
it's a Cho show.
I know what I'm doing.
Jesus Christ, dude. The amount of work put into he's fucking great. Because even after he got all the Facebook thing and like got rich from that whole deal, his story's wild. Like he wrote for Vice for a long time. He filmed a bunch of shit for Vice. Like there's a show called Thumbs Up where he and another dude hitchhike from LA to Miami. And then
back when Vice did cool shit.
Back when Vice did cool shit and it wasn't political. It was just fucking wild, man.
I used to, when I was in the early days of advertising, writing for Vice was one of my goals. Like
Same.
This was probably
I
2014, 15. Oh yeah, I really wanted to write for Vice. I loved everything Vice represented. I loved the dirty, nitty-gritty shit they were willing to do. And now Vice to me is just BuzzFeed. It's
and man,
same
it bums me out,
shit.
but because the population has told them that's what they want. And at some point they give in because you're too big, right? There'll always be people on the fringe that are the weirdos. And I guess getting back to the David Cho thing, like for him, he's just such full-blown lunatic artist. And he had wrote a piece because he and Bourdain were homies. And it was after Anthony had passed, and he had said, like, at some point we have to decide that pain and trauma aren't a competition. Because where does the world's most interesting man get to tell you that he's depressed? Like, he doesn't even feel he's depressed because he feels depressed because he knows how fucking good his life is. Mm-hmm. That doesn't change the way he feels. Right? So where does he get to vent? Where does he get to talk about it?
Right there, before you move on, it almost makes it worse when you have a life that other people tell you is so great, because you feel invalid in your depression. And
it doesn't make his problems not real fucking problems.
I talked about this with my buddy Andy Frisella, which I think you know him as well. The most depressed I was right after I got my major book deal, because it didn't make me happy. And then I thought, oh shit, there's something really fucked up with me. I have this major book deal. I live in a condo on the beach and I'm miserable. So there's something really wrong with me. And hearing people tell me, why aren't you happy? You should be stoked. You got this. It made it worse. It made me feel like there was something seriously fucked. Yeah. And that's exactly what I would imagine Anthony was feeling.
Well, especially when you ball in and realize you can't share it. Mm-hmm. Because everyone around you is like, how fucking dare you complain about anything?
That's why it's important that people who have this lifestyle that looks ridiculously great and enticing talk about it.
But also, I think it's important that we have peers. Mm-hmm. That you actually know other people that do this weird shit for a living.
Yeah.
That you get to look, man, you know how bad I feel about being burnt out and had my ass kicked by a paid for motorcycle trip on a free bike through a beautiful place. Like that's really fucking conflicting, because I can stay in the gratitude of how fucking rad that is and the opportunity, and I got paid to do it and we got to produce the content. But at the same time, like, it fucked me up. And if I don't acknowledge that thing and have the awareness to be able to shine some light on that part of me that's fucking dark and saying I got fucked up by it, I can't correct it.
I'm sure that's where Cho and Bourdain bonded. From what I understand, that was kind of what brought them together. Was they both had different levels of success, but they both had immense success, and they were just fairly miserable at times.
fairly miserable at times.
I think a lot of it, and I've spoke about this too, is the problem with creatives, because Anthony was very much a creative. He was a writer first and foremost. Is there's this romanticized idea that you have to have pain in order to create something worth a damn,
Well, I mean,
and
look
I
at
think
that
it's
reflection in Hunter S. Thompson or fucking
I
David Cho, for example, right?
I
That
think
who
it's
am
I
I
think
without
it's
my misery?
I think it's one of the most dangerous mindsets to continue facilitating in the world. And even when Anthony died, you heard people say, "Oh, but it's kind of romantic the way he went out." It's like, no, it's not. It's fucking
Fuck you,
sad.
man.
It's
Fuck you.
fucking
It's not
sad.
romantic.
And that's something that a lot of younger or even, older individuals need to get to their heads is you don't have to live in pain for the sake of being interesting. Um, a lot of people online will applaud or support your bad habits because it makes them feel less alone themselves. It doesn't mean your bad habits are what make you special or unique. It just means, man, I should have brought more water to this. It just means your bad habits make other people feel less bad. And they don't want to feel like they're the only one fucking their life up, and so they like seeing you do stuff that's detrimental too. And a lot of people connect or they attach to the fact that they're the tortured creative. When once you understand where creativity really comes from, which no one actually knows where it comes from, it just comes from putting in the work and sitting down and forcing yourself to do it. You realize you don't need to fuck up your life at the same time. I'd say my life right now is probably the most stable it's ever been in the terms of, I don't drink.
His Wi-Fi power back on.
Which is a longer form memoir. I know without a doubt is going to be my best book yet, and I think it's going to be also a book that's very dark but very motivating, and it's not coming from a place of me feeling that I have to destroy my life to write it. It's coming from a place of me understanding that I can write when I want to write by simply having that desire and the time to do it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That whole part of the, that without my disease, whether that is the addiction to pain or the suffering or anything that kind of a lot of people cling to, will find themselves not interesting, will find themselves not having that motivation for their art or the writing or think that that's such a big part of it. I mean, how many people think, well, I have to be drunk to drink, or, I write my best when I'm drinking.
No, you fucking don't. It's just because when you're drinking, you don't overthink things.
Right.
So
Right.
you need to teach yourself. The thing about drinking is it brings up your emotions that are real that you just suppress. And that's why people, when they're drunk, become more loving, they become more open, or they become more angry because they're suppressing a bunch of anger. Once you learn to just let that out without drugs or alcohol, you realize that it's always been within you. You just weren't courageous enough, is probably the right word. You weren't courageous enough to tap into it without the help of something else.
Sure. And, for who knows why, the years before that, implant the idea that it has to be suppressed, that it's not acceptable to be spoken about, that you can't show this, you'll be judged or thought of this way if you do, or any of those filters, that rules we put on ourselves.
I'd say the hardest thing in my life when it came to reinventing myself for personal growth was my drinking.
Yeah.
And it was largely because it was my persona, it was my reputation, it was my relief. It was the way that I felt I was interesting. It was my way to socialize and feel accepted by other people.
And proud of
And
the fact that you could probably be good at it.
yeah, and I was very good at it. I used to tell
Yeah,
people,
man, I fucking was very proud of my ability.
I used to tell people my drinking is like a 401k. I've been putting deposits in this thing since I was a teenager. Like my 401k is so big now, like I can outdrink any one of you.
Right.
And I was very proud of it.
Same.
And when I decided to stop drinking and I started hanging out with friends without drinking, it was very difficult at first because one, it's easy just to reach for the drink and get in that habit again. But two, it was hard to feel like I was letting them down because I could see in their face how they were kind of bummed when it's like, oh, I'm not drinking tonight. And they'd be like, no, come on, one shot. It's like, nah. And in learning to say no, it made every area of my life easier. So drinking is probably the hardest thing for me to overcome, but in doing so, it was the most impactful thing in all areas of my life because if I could say no at a bar with a bunch of old friends when it came to having a beer, it's very easy for me to say no and set boundaries in every other aspect of my life
Yeah.
because that was the big test for me. And I still drink here and there, but even now when I drink, I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I'm gonna wake up tomorrow feeling crappy, and I'm not gonna do the work I want
Oh
to
man,
do.
it's never
And
fucking worth it anymore.
I
Juice
have
isn't
to,
worth the squeeze.
yeah, I have to be in a really good environment. It has to be like something that feels fairly special.
It,
Like my birthday was last week, and I had three old fashions, and I woke up the next day like, oh my god, what did I do?
right. It's
But
amazing how quickly that 401k fucking bails on you.
right, well,
Jesus Christ.
it happened to everybody the last couple of years. The stock market crashed, and so did my drinking ability.
Yeah.
Um,
Now,
but I'm way better as a writer and a person without it.
yeah, well, I mean, you can be more reflective and also on
Yeah.
time, and your brain works better. Like simple brain chemistry shows a number of
Mhm.
things, right? That taking care of yourself would allow your brain to fucking operate better. No shit.
Imagine that.
Imagine that. Imagine that. Say one of the big important things in our life is the only way we fuel this goddamn meat machine is through this hole in our face. If we decided that the importance of the quality of things we put in it really would change the way it operates, because
Well,
of
you
fucking
actually,
course it would.
it's not just the hole in your face. I mean, you feel it through your eyes and your ears too. It's
Sure.
everything you take in, the food, what you read, what you watch, what you listen to.
Yeah, the amount of time people spend watching shit that bums them out.
Oh, it's incredible.
Well, like what was that on it years ago? I remember hearing the stat the first time I think was regarding like Howard Stern. And it was, people that love Howard Stern show on average listen for like 30 minutes a day. And people that despise Howard Stern show listen for 55.
Sounds about right.
And I'm like, fuck, man.
That's
What
terrible.
a weird thing we do as a species.
I've never been a Howard Stern fan.
It's not I don't care for it at all.
I remember his show would come on late on like the E network or something when I was in high school.
Yeah, I'd watch it because there were boobs.
I was trying to even then I've probably watched maybe 3 Howard Stern episodes, or he's probably had 3 hours of my entire life is how much I've devoted to him. Because
from what I understand, his interviews were supposed to be really great.
I just always thought he was a cocksucker. Like I just never, to use that word, I just never liked him.
Fair, man. But he's never a dude I wanted to hang out with.
I just thought he was a fucking douche.
Man, I've recently dove a lot more into like Hunter S. Thompson stuff. And realizing just what a fucking lunatic.
He was a lunatic too. He was also a douche. As a person, you'd probably enjoy hanging out with him for an hour or two, and then you'd be like, whoa, this guy's a piece of shit.
Well, but there was a point, right, where he shifted, where he quit being Hunter S. Thompson, this writer, and he became Dr. Gonzo. Yeah. Because he was like, that's what people fucking want. Here they go. I'll give them full fucking bore. And he fires guns from his desk and is constantly, the whole Hunter S. Thompson's daily routine, thing that's been immortalized, which is fucking.
And I would imagine that has been also not just immortalized, but it's been, right. I can't even think of the word right now, but it's definitely not accurate.
Of course. I'm sure there's exaggeration to it a ton.
There's the word. They've exaggerated that.
That may be a PR day.
He's a good example again of, like you just said, people wanted that character of him, so he went full bore into that character, and that character is what destroyed him.
Absolutely,
that character is why he killed himself.
Because that's a big difference than the guy who ran for sheriff in Aspen. Like that guy's really fucking interesting, dude. Like that guy shows up. The guy who was doing the journalist stuff with the Hells Angels, because
that was him. That was him. And then he lost who he was, and he started feeding this outward persona. And that's what people do on social media these days. They see what gets them attention, they see what gets them, sympathy. And a lot of times it's playing the victim. A lot of times it's either complaining about your life or doing something incredibly fucking toxic and stupid. And people support that. So they lean into that and they start getting more views on their reels. And then 10 years down the road, they have no idea who the fuck they are. And their life's horrible because they've realized they've lived their whole life for other people.
Well, and you're
Um,
trapped.
and
You're
you're
fucking
trapped in it
trapped.
because now your income's tied to it. If you want to blow up that persona, you have to blow up a lot of other things. And it's something that I see getting worse. And I think it's going to continue to get worse as
But let's just look at the social media thing now as a new profession. But isn't that always the fucking case, right? That like if you want to pivot and shift, you're gonna have to fucking let go of shit. You're gonna have to not be that person anymore, right? Like if you became big shot ad exec and realize you don't want to do that anymore, like it's not like all of those people are just gonna take your back and ride with you to the next job. A lot of that you're starting over. And
yeah, I
it's
did.
the same. Well, I mean,
I've
but
moved it.
not you particularly, right? But like, say your influencer who gets famous because they're doing food challenges,
Hmm.
and then they don't want to fucking do food challenges anymore. Like, you don't get bummed that people don't want to follow you to the next thing. You can start a new fucking thing, but you can't like be like, I'm stuck doing this. Like, yo, you created that trap.
I think that's the importance of the long game mentality too, because if you have that long game mentality, you can view that as a stepping stone to what you want to do next. And
That's
even if
exactly
you
how I look at
know,
it.
even if you know you're going to have this short-lived moment as, a TikTok dancer or something, and you don't want to do that forever, if you have the long game, you can say, okay, but with this, I can set myself up for this and I could save money to help with this. And then you make that slow pivot. It's just avoiding getting caught in that machine for longer than you intend to. That's the
Yep.
problem because it's very addictive and it's very easy to continue feeling that beast when that beast is becoming bigger and bigger.
Especially when you think the approval is what's fulfilling you, like if not the
Yeah.
creating part. Because as long
Yeah.
as like I said, right, like once I realized I'm really happy as long as I get to create,
Mm.
and I can keep that energy pretty focused on like 4 or 5 things that line up with my universe.
That's kind of where I try and do too. Like what I said earlier, I like to write primarily, but if I can keep kind of things in almost in orbit of that main goal, like the writing is what I do. There's things that are going to orbit around it, like different moons per se, which are different avenues of
Well,
me allowing.
speaking engagements are totally that.
Yeah, or like writing different types. And I still do quite a bit of creative directing in the hospitality space. I do maybe 6 contracts a year where I do branding of hotels and restaurants. Because I do like the logo design, the color
Mhm.
palette, typography. I like telling the story behind a historic building and trying to turn into a restaurant that articulates that story and represents it well and creates an experience for diners to come into. I love that aspect of it. And I love architecture. And it would be a big goal of mine to someday in life own my own boutique hotel. I would like to own, like a 20 to 50 room hotel with really stylized, good storytelling, preferably a haunted house of sorts. But um,
Here's a
I, I
second
love
question.
I love all that.
Do you want to create and own one of those, or do you want to run one of those?
I want to own it. I
There we
want to
go.
own it.
Yeah. That's
I,
how I feel about like
uh,
restaurant concepts or
uh,
like anything I've had. I was like, I don't want to fucking run a restaurant. I would
uh.
love to see this exist.
Well, this is why you hire a management team. I mean,
Sure.
every hotel owner I've worked with in my career, I think I only know one that actually manages the properties under his own team as well. Most all of them hire a property management or consulting firm that only operates, and you bring them in to handle all the minutia that you don't want to fuck with, and you just kind of focus on the larger picture of the concept, keeping it enticing kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, fucking some 4 bedroom abandoned mansion with a good
It'd be
story.
awesome. It'd be fun.
Great fun,
I
right?
love design. I love design. I love painting. I love artwork. I have a pretty extensive art collection. My dad's an artist. He's been an artist his whole life. He's been an illustrator. He's actually the one illustrating my children's books. So
Oh,
growing
that's
up,
so cool, man. What a
it's a
really,
great
really
project.
cool
It's
experience.
a great project. growing up, my dad always illustrated books from home, and I would sit in his art room and he'd listen to Led Zeppelin and give me a crayon and some paper, and I'd draw alongside him. So I always grew up in that kind of household, and it's something that I'm very drawn to. And then my mom was always a big reader, as I talked about earlier. So anything creative, as you're saying, is kind of what intrigues me. And I think everyone needs a creative outlet. Humans need whether it's gardening or making clothes or making video shorts. You have to have a creative outlet as a human.
I could even call that athletics.
Yeah.
Because like even training or something like that, I can find it almost in the same light now.
Well, there's that quote. There's that.
Long.
Yeah, there's that quote that says people need three things. You need a hobby that keeps you in shape, a hobby that makes you money, and a hobby that lets you create.
Yeah.
And if you happen to, like athletics, like you're just saying, if you can find something that does all three of those, man, you're fucking killing it.
Dude, I mean, that's kind of why we have 3 8-hour sections in a day, right? Like really good, easy windows to try to switch those three things into. Man, I look at, man, the hustle culture and everything like that's growing, and it's not going to slow down. But everyone will kind of learn that it's not as fulfilling either. That like, unless you're doing the thing to create time to do shit you love, that side of it, that just making money, that just showing up, that like flossing and showing people the success side of shit, man, it's not sustainable long term.
Not at all. It's something I even struggle with, where I have a hard time relaxing and going to the beach and just having a nice day because I feel like I should be writing.
Yep.
Like, I should be writing about this. And so I have a hard time even turning off my desire to create 24/7. And it's something that drives my girlfriend nuts. And it's something that I am actively working on, is being able to be present in a moment without taking notes on it or trying to think of how I'm going to write something about it later, and just enjoying things for the sake of enjoying it.
Man, that thought right there is one I share a lot, like that in the moment. I'm a lot of times. So I noticed that for me because doing podcast and talking and things like that, one of those is like, with now my experience of psychedelics or any of that, like a lot of times when I'm in it, I find myself thinking about how do I explain it?
Yeah.
Instead of, right. And that's such
instead of just being in it.
Yep. It's a tough
thing it benefits me a lot at times, but then at times it's like, man, I am just doing this the wrong way.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Because then you almost feel, if you didn't pull something from it, you feel as though you wasted the time. You're like, okay, not only I wasn't in it, but I also didn't derive anything from it to write about. So I just completely fucking wasted that afternoon.
Just blew that afternoon. Great work.
I didn't relax and I didn't create. So what the hell was I doing? Yeah, I feel that often.
Man, this has been a joy, dude. I want to say thanks a bunch, dude.
I'm glad we were able to finally make it happen. And hopefully when I'm in St. Louis again, we can connect in person.
Let's do that. We've always got room at the house.
Funny story that I was going to tell you. When you reached out to me on Instagram, I recognized you, and I was like, I seen this guy before, and it was your clothing stuff I've seen, because I'm sure you've heard of Donuts and Deadlifts, that brand.
Chrissy and I were really good friends for a long time.
So I was actually the one that did all that design for Chrissy early on. So Chrissy was staying with me in Salt Lake, and she said, I want to start this clothing brand. And she told me the name of it, and I went up to my little computer area and I designed the logo and I set up the website for it, and I was like, let's just fucking do it. And I designed probably the first 24 shirts for that brand to get it off the ground for. And I remember seeing your brand kind of take off at the same time. And so when you reached out to me, I was like, oh, I remember this guy. I think this guy was friends with Chrissy for a bit.
Yeah, I fucking was the officiant at their wedding.
Oh, right on. I'm actually officiating a wedding next week.
I've done a handful.
That's cool,
through that course and finding your writing through her. Probably around when you did You Can Quote Me.
2015.
Yeah. So finding that, like, I just immediately took to it and have followed since and been like, oh, this the tone's all exactly right for the shit I'm into.
Well, I'm glad we're able to connect, and hopefully in person soon.
Yeah, dude, we absolutely fucking will. Man, if there's anything you ever need, let me know. And
same to you.
I hope people take away a lot of that looking at like the big journey picture and not the in the moment panicked about what is and what isn't, and more like it's developing, man.
Yeah, particularly being a creative or just any kind of entrepreneur wanting to do something that allows you to have your independence, you have to be willing to feel lost, but keep moving and have the long game mentality.
Yeah, a lot of eyes forward, man. A lot of years left. At least I
All
hope.
right. Yeah. Not dead yet, right?
That's it, brother. Not dead yet. We'll keep after it. Brother, have a great day, and I'll chat with you soon.
All right. You too. Later, man.
Later.